Good morning, boys and girls. I'm Eleanor Hawkins, and welcome to Telestory Time. Buddy Book wanted to come again this morning so he could listen to stories, and here he is. You know, he's my little book friend. He has arms and legs and really pretty red shoes, a big nose, and a happy smile. And inside he says, "Hello, I'm a book and I'm your buddy. Together we can laugh and sing. Together we can play and share. Together we can read and dream." And there he is in his own little bed. Yes, boys and girls, little Buddy Book has come this morning to listen to our stories. And I'll put him right over here so he can sit comfortably. And we're all ready to read you the story of The Helpful Friends. The squirrel family knew that they lived in the very nicest old hollow tree in the forest. Their little house was warm and cozy, and just snug enough for Mr. and Mrs. Squirrel and Baby Squirrel. Mrs. Squirrel was especially happy because with one swish of her bushy tail, the little house was dusted for the day. One morning the three squirrels went off through the woods for a holiday. All day long they scurried and scampered through the leaves and around the trees and chased their bushy tails. But when Mrs. Squirrel had finished the last daisy chain, they knew it was time to go home. Little Baby Squirrel scampered after his mother and father with his daisy chain over one ear. He thought of the nice supper his mother would fix. He was very hungry. When they were near home, they saw a dreadful sight. Their hickory tree was being chopped down. Down came the old hollow tree with a loud crash. Down came the warm, cozy little house, snug enough for the three squirrels. All the nuts and acorns in the storehouse were buried in the ground under the tree. Mrs. Squirrel sat right down and cried, while Mr. Squirrel ran around and around in circles trying to decide just what could be done. And right in the midst of this unhappy family flew fat, sassy Blue Jay. It didn't take him very long to see just what the matter was. "Our supply of nuts is gone," moaned Mr. Squirrel. Mrs. Squirrel sobbed. "Don't worry about a thing," Blue Jay said. "You have lots of friends, and I'll get them to help." And off he flew. Blue Jay flew straight to Chipmunk's house. Chipmunk was Squirrel's cousin and certainly could be counted on to help. "This is terrible news of the family," said Chipmunk. "Luckily, I've stored plenty of acorns this year. I'll gather a supply and come as fast as I can." And he scurried off. Rabbit was just leaving the cabbage patch when Blue Jay caught up with him and told him the dreadful news. "Dear me," said Rabbit, "what a terrible thing. I'll be over as soon as I can pick some berries for them." And off he went, hippity hop. Blue Jay met Porcupine on his way home to supper. "Oh, I'll be glad to help our neighbors," Porcupine said as soon as he heard what had happened. "Let me pick some nice juicy bark for them, and I'll come right over." And he hurried away. On the way to his house, Porcupine ran into Woodchuck. "Have you heard the terrible news?" gasped Porcupine. "Yes, Blue Jay has just told me," said Woodchuck. "I'm taking some juicy bark," said Porcupine. "I'm taking some of my very sweetest clover," said Woodchuck. And they rushed off in opposite directions. Back at the fallen tree, the squirrel family was very sad indeed. Cousin Chipmunk hurried up. He was wheeling a wire basket brimming over with golden brown acorns, and he had run so fast that he could hardly catch his breath. The squirrels started to smile once more. Before they could even thank Cousin Chipmunk, they heard a hippity-hop in the forest, and Rabbit burst through the trees. The basket he was carrying was chock full of ripe red berries. "I hope I'm in time," he gasped. "I hope I am too," said Porcupine, coming up behind Rabbit. "I've brought some of my juiciest bark for your dinner." And sure enough, he had filled his hat with tender young bark. The squirrel family didn't know what to say next. They had never before had so many lovely things to eat all at once. "Well, why don't you try my clover?" called out Woodchuck, running up with his little red wheelbarrow full of sweet clover. "Oh, it's really delicious." Suddenly, Mr. and Mrs. Squirrel turned and looked at each other. "Why, this is all perfectly lovely," said Mrs. Squirrel, "but we have no house to put this food in." No house. Rabbit looked at Porcupine. Woodchuck looked at Chipmunk, and Chipmunk stared at the squirrels. No house. What were they to do? "Don't worry about a thing," said a deep voice, and there was Mr. Owl with his friend Blue Jay. "I've taken care of everything because I am the wisest bird in the forest." The squirrels smiled hopefully, and everyone followed Owl through the woods. They came to a clearing. In the middle stood a great tree, and the woodpeckers had at that very moment finished pecking out a warm, cozy house, just snug enough for the three squirrels. Oh, the squirrel family was very happy. They thanked Chipmunk for the golden brown acorns, and Rabbit for the red ripe berries, and Porcupine for his tender young bark, and Woodchuck for the sweet clover. And then they thanked Blue Jay and Owl and the woodpeckers for their nice new house. Then everyone hurried off to supper. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Squirrel and Baby Squirrel live in a warm, cozy house just snug enough for three. And Mrs. Squirrel especially likes it because with one swish of her bushy tail, the little house is dusted for the day. And that, boys and girls, is the story of The Helpful Friends. And now stay tuned, and we'll be back in just a moment to show you books from the shelves of your public library. Boys and girls, I hope that all of you enjoy a very special time every evening for a story hour with your parents. And today I brought you some very special books that are especially good for your bedtime story hour. The very first one is entitled Once Upon a Time. You know, those words have a certain amount of magic when they start out a very special story. And inside we have the story of the fairy pool, and look at that beautiful illustration. Yes, this is a whole book of very good stories entitled Once Upon a Time. Our next book is a picture story, the one that you're very familiar with. Yes, it's the story of The Gingerbread Man, and this has wonderful illustrations, as you can see, all the way through. Yes, this is the story of The Gingerbread Man. Our next book is another picture story. It's entitled The Woman and the Peddler. And this is an old folk tale, and it is told through lots of reading and very nice illustrations. Yes, this is the story, The Old Woman and the Peddler. And then this is a rather new book in our regional system. It's entitled Dream Catcher. And that's an unusual title, isn't it? This is a delightful story, and as you can see, there aren't many words, but lots and lots of beautiful pictures all the way through. Yes, this is the story, Dream Catcher. I brought along this book because many of you love the Peter Rabbit stories, and this has all of them. Yes, this is a child's treasury of Beatrix Potter, and inside you can see we have the tale of Puddle Duck, and we have the story of a fierce bad rabbit, and that is Peter Cottontail right there, Peter Rabbit. And all the way here is Squirrel Nutkin. Yes, all these are the stories, a child's treasury of Beatrix Potter. And last of all, I brought along this book, a picture book that's entitled The Six Who Were Left in a Shoe. And of course, this is the old woman who lived in the shoe. And this is a delightful tale about the six who were left in a shoe. Boys and girls, be sure and visit your public library sometime during this next week, one of the libraries in the Craven-Pamlico Carteret Regional Library System. And be sure and use your library card to check out some very good books. And now stay tuned, and we'll be back with another story in just a moment. And now, boys and girls, get very comfortable and ready to listen to the story of The Two Little Fire Engine. Once upon a time, there was a little red fire engine who lived in a toy shop. "I'd like to go to a real fire just once," said the little red fire engine to the other toys. "Pooh," said the stuffed striped elephant, "you are only a little toy engine. You wouldn't be any help at all at a big fire." Now the little engine said, "Oh yes, I would. There would be plenty of things for a little engine to do." All the other toys began to laugh at him. The Calico Clown and the Jack-in-the-Box laughed the loudest of all. "You've never even seen a fire," said the Calico Clown. "How would you know what to do? You're too little. You would only be in the way." But the little fire engine decided to go to the very next big fire. Now that very afternoon he heard the fire siren blow, and out of the toy shop door he dashed, and he stood at the curb panting. The big red fire engines went tearing by, sirens screeching and bells clanging. "Whew," said the little fire engine, "I didn't know real fire engines were so big." He did his best to keep up, but the big engines went too fast. They got to the fire first. Now when he got there, the big engines were already at work. The long hoses were twisting and winding all around. The little engine could hardly get through. He puffed and panted first over one hose and then another, and at last he was close to the fire, and then he looked around for a job that he could do. "I'll shoot water," he thought, but his little hose was so short that the stream of water didn't even reach the flames. "I wish someone would tell me just what I could do," he said to himself. The engines had plenty of work, but there wasn't anything a little fire engine could do. Just then he saw a spark fly from the burning building, and it landed right beside him. "Here," said the little engine, "this will never do," and he turned his hose on the little fire. His hose was just the right size. In an instant the spark was out. And then the little engine had a good idea. I'll be a spark watcher, he decided. I can put out little fires before they get to be big fires. So he raced around looking for flying sparks. Whenever he saw one, he hurried to put it out. Finally, one of the big fire engines saw the little fire engine scooting around so busily. It looks as if we have a new helper, said the big fire engine. Good work, little fellow. The big engines were busy putting out the big fire, and they were very glad to have the little fire engine putting out the little fires. Finally, the whole fire was put out. All the tired engines began rolling up their hoses. The little engine was starting home when one of the big engines called to him. Well, why don't you come along to the firehouse with us, little engine? We can use you. The little engine was delighted. I'd like very much, but first I must go home and tell the other toys so they won't worry about me. As he came to the door of the toy shop, he thought he smelled smoke. He sniffed again, and then he saw the flicker of flames in a wastebasket. Fire, he shouted, and he clanged his bell as loudly as he could. The other toys came running. Where, they cried. Oh, save us, help, help. They all ran around, but no one knew what to do, and they were too frightened to think. Only the little fire engine was calm. He had been to a fire, and he knew just what to do. He backed as close as he could to the burning wastebasket. He unwound his hose and sent a stream of water splashing on the flames. In an instant, the fire was out. Thank goodness you came in time, the toy said. They all crowded around and thanked him. They wiped off the smoke and water. They rubbed and polished him until he was bright and shiny once more. I don't know what we would have done without you, said the stuffed striped elephant. We are all so proud of you. The little engine was very happy. He said to himself, I guess I won't leave after all. Big fires are for big fire engines, but little fires are for little fire engines. I'm just the right size to take care of a little fire. Who knows what might happen here if I should go away? So the happy little fire engine settled down for a long nap, for he had had a very, very busy day. And that, boys and girls, is the story of the Two Little Fire Engine. And now stay tuned, and we'll be back with another story in just a moment. And now, boys and girls, I'm going to read you a story from a very little book. And the title of the story is Mrs. Hen Goes to Market. One morning very early, Henrietta Hen lay in bed and opened one eye. She saw the sun was just peeking over the hill. And then she heard the rooster cry, cock-a-doodle-doo, and she knew that it was morning. Henrietta thought, everyone else is going to do something wonderful today, but I shall do the same old things I do every day. Cook the breakfast, wash the dishes, sweep the floor, and go to market. And she sighed a big sigh. I don't want to even get up. But she did get up. She cooked a big corn pudding for breakfast, and then she tied some lunch in a big red handkerchief for Rooster, and then she shooed the children into the garden to play. Same old dishes, grumbled Henrietta. as she washed the dishes. "Same old dust," she muttered as she swept the floor. "And same old going to market," she said, reaching for her bonnet and her shawl. She picked up her pocketbook and her shopping bag and her umbrella and trudged down the road to the market. And there she bought some beautiful red apples for an apple pie. Now on the way home, Henrietta was still grumbling. Nothing ever happens to me," when a raindrop splashed down on her nose. And then the wind began to blow. And then overhead there was a big black cloud. Henrietta opened her umbrella right away because she didn't like to get wet. No sooner had she opened the umbrella than a strong gust of wind swept under it. She was so busy trying to hold on to the umbrella and the pocketbook and the shopping bag, and at the same time to keep her tail feathers dry, she didn't notice that her feet had left the ground. Then she looked down and saw that the wind was carrying her up, up, up into the air. "Heavens," she gasped, "there goes my pocketbook." The pocketbook landed a plop in Mrs. Duck's yard. "Oh, look, it's raining pennies," cried Mrs. Duck. "And there go my beautiful red apples," said Henrietta. The red apples fell all round Mrs. Goose below. "It's raining apples," shouted Mrs. Goose. Meanwhile, Henrietta was being lifted higher and higher up into the sky, but she was getting used to it. She even decided that it was fun to ride along in the wind. She was just thinking about enjoying the sights when, swoosh, her umbrella blew inside out. She hadn't expected this. In an instant she was dropping like an arrow down through to the earth below. She saw the trees getting nearer and nearer and nearer, and in her fright she started to flap her wings. And then she noticed that she wasn't falling anymore, and she flapped her wings all the harder. "Oh, look, look, I'm flying," she cried. "I'm a bird. Oh, this is wonderful. I shall fly and fly and fly all over town." And she did. She flew over the apple orchard and over the river and over the cabbage patch, and she just missed the church steeple. "Oh, things do look different from up here," she thought. After a while, her wings began to get very tired, and she began to think about going home. Henrietta's children were still playing in the garden when her shadow crossed the grass, and they all looked up. "Oh, look, it's a hawk," cried one. "Oh, it's an eagle," cried another. "It's Mama," cried the third. Now Henrietta landed in the pansy patch. Her feathers were all ruffled, her shawl was all twisted, and her bonnet was hanging around her neck. But you know, there was a happy look on her face. "I never would have thought of flying," said Henrietta. Henrietta doesn't mind getting up in the morning anymore. She bounces out of bed, clucking a jolly little song. She hustles with the cooking and hustles with the dishes and hustles with the sweeping. And she just can't wait to go to market, because you know now, boys and girls, Henrietta flies to market every day. And that is the story of Mrs. Hen Goes to Market. And I see I have time enough to read this poem entitled Autumn Fires by Robert Louis Stevenson. In the outer gardens and all up the vale, from the autumn bonfires, see the smoke trail? Pleasant summer's over, and all the summer flowers. The red fire blazes, the gray smoke towers. Sing a song of seasons, something bright in all, flowers in the summer, fires in the fall. And that is the poem of Autumn Fires from A Child's Garden of Verses. And now, boys and girls, I see it's time for us to close our book of stories for this morning. But be sure and have your bedtime story hour tonight. And we'll be back next Saturday morning. Until then, this is Eleanor Hawkins saying bye-bye for Telestory Time.